Iraq had only 58 kilometers of coast. Mudflats and shallow channels formed the entire shoreline. Kuwait stood to the south. Iran lay east. Yet by 1990, Iraq had assembled one of the Persian Gulf's largest fleets. Soviet frigates, Chinese patrol boats, minesweepers, landing craft, and anti-ship missile boats. More than 100 vessels, around 5,000 personnel. The ships had little room to maneuver. Their route to open water ran through channels neighboring states could close. Operation Desert Storm began in January 1991. Crews abandoned ships. Some crossed to Iran in their own vessels. Others followed through the shallow water near Bubiyan Island, where coalition forces destroyed them. Most Iraqi ships vanished within days. Many never fired a shot. The collapse began before combat. Every Iraqi warship had to leave Qasr through one exposed route. Iraq was almost landlocked. Its coast at the northern end of the Persian Gulf measured only 58 kilometers. The Tigris and Euphrates joined there to form the Shatt al-Arab. Iraq and Iran disputed that waterway for centuries. The dispute became one of the immediate causes of the Iran-Iraq War. Qasr was Iraq's main naval base. From its docks, ships entered a 103-kilometer channel before reaching open water. Shallow water pressed in on both sides. Kuwaiti territory ran alongside the passage. That route controlled the fleet. An enemy did not need to search the whole Gulf. It could close the channel. Iraq, therefore, needed vessels suited to a narrow coast and a confined approach. Control of that passage mattered more than distant operations. Yet the Navy carried wider regional ambition. Its ships prepared for a war Iraq could not freely maneuver in. The channel to Qasr stretched 103 kilometers through shallow water beside Kuwaiti territory. A restricted route to the Gulf demanded small ships, not a blue water fleet. After the July Revolution of 1958, Baghdad obtained them from the Soviet Union. The revolution overthrew the Hashemite monarchy and created the Republic of Iraq. Britain was leaving. The new government needed another arms supplier. Moscow stepped in, seeking influence in the Middle East. The first deliveries included torpedo boats, minesweepers, and submarine chasers. Their low profiles suited Iraq's narrow coastal waters. These were not ships for distant patrols. They were built for nearby channels, mines, and sudden contact. In 1961, Iraq claimed Kuwait after its independence from Britain. British warships arrived and blocked an Iraqi move. The crisis passed, but the fleet's task was clear: watch the Shatt al-Arab and threaten Kuwaiti waters when Baghdad ordered it. Soviet deliveries continued through the 1960s and into the 1970s. Then came the OSA missile boats, fast attack craft, low hulls, launchers above the deck, and P-15 anti-ship missiles aimed at larger warships. Egyptian OSA boats had used the same missiles against the Israeli destroyer INS Eilat in 1967. Iraq became the first Persian Gulf state to operate missile-armed warships. The fleet remained small. Its OSA boats entered service carrying P-15 anti-ship missiles. P-15 missiles marked a new step. Baghdad soon sought ships built beyond Iraq's narrow coast. Oil revenue in the 1970s widened Saddam Hussein's choices. He became president in 1979. The Soviet Union still supplied most Army and Air Force equipment. For the Navy, Baghdad turned to Italy. In 1977, Iraq ordered 4 Lupo-class frigates and 6 Assad-class corvettes. Each Lupo displaced 2,500 tons. Otomat anti-ship missiles, a 127mm gun, torpedoes, and a helicopter filled its deck and hangar. These were ships for open water operations. Iraq never received the whole order: 4 Lupo frigates, 6 Assad corvettes, Those offshore ambitions met a mined river mouth. After Iraq invaded Iran in September 1980, Iranian forces mined the Shatt al-Arab. Ships at Basra and Qasr could not move freely. The route to the Gulf crossed shallow water. Mines waited below. Iranian aircraft and missile boats watched above. An Iraqi sortie now began under threat. The fleet had to leave port through that narrow approach before it could face Iran in open water. Geography had turned the coast into a barrier. On November 5th, an Iranian missile boat, Paykan, met two Iraqi missile boats. Paykan sank both. One fell to a missile. The other went down after fire from Paykan's 76mm gun. Iraq answered with 6 anti-ship missile launches. None stopped Paykan. The boat survived. Then, on November 28th, Iranian F-4 Phantom jets struck Iraqi ships operating in the northern Gulf. 5 Osa-class missile boats sank. 4 Komar-class boats followed them. Iraqi fighters scrambled to defend the ships and lost 2 aircraft. The ships below received no protection. In 1 month, Iraq lost the core of its missile boat force. Paykan had survived 6 Iraqi missile launches. After the first losses, Iraqi ships rarely moved beyond the northern Gulf. In 1983, 2 more Osa-class missile boats disappeared during attacks on Iranian oil facilities. The fleet stopped defensive operations. Shatt al-Arab remained mined and disputed throughout the war. Iraqi crews stayed at their berths or ran short patrols near the coast. The sea campaign moved overhead. French-supplied Super Étendard and Mirage F-1 jets carried Exocet anti-ship missiles beneath their wings. They struck Iranian oil sites and tanker traffic. The Navy no longer led those attacks. By the end of 1987, Iraqi aircraft had carried out 283 strikes on shipping. Almost none involved Iraqi warships. By the August 1988 ceasefire, about 80% of the pre-war fleet had been destroyed. The surviving ships were damaged, uncertain, and demoralized. Italian frigates and corvettes still waited in Mediterranean ports. Saddam had paid for some of the Gulf's strongest conventional warships, but Iran controlled the Strait of Hormuz. The ships could not reach Iraq. Those unreachable warships left Saddam Hussein with a shorter task: rebuild from whatever Iraq could actually control. He had only 2 years before another war closed that window. He pushed for the Italian ships, opened talks for Italian submarines, and gathered vessels already within reach. By January 1991, Iraq had assembled ships from 3 sources. Some had survived the Iran-Iraq War. Others returned after repairs during the 2 years since the ceasefire. The rest came from Kuwait. On August 2, 1990, Iraqi forces seized Kuwaiti naval bases during the invasion. They took 5 Lürsen TNC-45 fast attack craft, German-built missile boats carrying Exocet missiles. 1 Lürsen FPB-57 and about 20 other vessels also fell into Iraqi hands. The Iraqi Navy quickly absorbed the captured Kuwaiti boats. 5 months later, those same fast craft were sunk off the Kuwaiti coast they had been meant to defend. Those losses narrowed the fleet to what Iraq could actually put to sea. At an Iraqi berth stood Ibn Khaldun, a 96-meter training frigate commissioned in 1980. Yugoslavia built it. A 57mm Bofors gun, torpedo tubes, and autocannons armed the ship. But training remained its main task. The stronger ships were elsewhere. 4 Lupo-class frigates stood impounded in La Spezia after Iraq invaded Kuwait. 6 Assad-class corvettes were completed too. None reached Iraq. By January 1991, Ibn Khaldun was Iraq's largest vessel in hand. The fleet had rebuilt its missile force with 8 Osa-class boats after the Iran-Iraq War. Yet 4 Lupo frigates and 6 Assad corvettes remained at an Italian dock throughout the Gulf War. With its larger warships held overseas, Iraq turned to the weapons already inside the Gulf. Around 1,300 mines became the fleet's main threat. 8 Soviet Osa-class missile boats carried P-15 Styx anti-ship missiles. 5 captured Kuwaiti TNC-45 fast attack craft still carried Exocet missiles. Chinese-built Borgomol patrol boats added guns and rockets. But the mine crews delivered results. Soviet T-43 ocean minesweepers and Yevgenia inshore minesweepers prepared the water. Iraq also converted other vessels for mine-laying work. Between the invasion of Kuwait and the opening of Desert Storm, they laid about 1,300 mines across 6 fields. Each field used several barrier lines. The hull of a mine breaks the surface. Steel hangs over water. Those fields damaged 2 American ships on the same February day in 1991. USS Princeton, a Ticonderoga-class missile cruiser, struck a mine. USS Tripoli, an Iwo Jima-class helicopter assault ship, suffered damage as well. Reports recorded both ships. Iraq also held Soviet Polnotny-class medium landing ships and smaller landing craft. Planners intended an amphibious move down the Saudi coast. Troops and armor could have reached a beach, then threatened the coastal road behind coalition forces. The British Royal Navy intercepted that landing group before it reached its objective. British ships sank it. Zouk-class patrol boats, S-01 submarine chasers, support vessels, and captured Kuwaiti craft filled out the roster. On paper, Iraq had more than 100 vessels. In the Gulf, the minefields caused the clearest damage. Those minefields did not open an exit. Iraq's vessels remained crowded at Qasr, behind one shallow channel between Iraq and Kuwait. More than 100 ships appeared on fleet lists. The channel gave them one route. It ran 103 kilometers to sea. Qasr stood at its inland end. The water was shallow, barely enough for larger vessels, and the passage was narrow. A few mines could block it. An airstrike at a choke point could do the same. Poor maintenance limited readiness. Crew training varied sharply, and some crews had almost none. There was no organized way out. Operation Desert Storm began on January 17, 1991. United States, British, and Canadian warships had built their presence in the northern Gulf for months. They waited beyond the waters Iraq needed to cross. The Iraqi Navy could not maneuver around them. It also lacked a practical attack plan. Silkworm anti-ship missile batteries stood on shore. They could not sail with the fleet. The missile boats carried aging Styx weapons and had to close dangerously with their targets. Minesweepers had finished laying their barriers across the northern Gulf. Their task had ended. In the first days of the air campaign, United States, British, and Canadian aircraft and naval guns began regular attacks on Iraqi vessels and port facilities. P-3C Orion maritime patrol aircraft, 4-engine turboprops, watched the northern Gulf. Shallow water under the hulls, explosions beside the berths. The ships stayed in port. After the port strikes, Iraq's Navy chose escape. On the evening of January 29th, a P-3C Orion crew found lights moving through Khor Abdullah Channel. Its surface search radar tracked a large group leaving Qasr and turning north toward Iran. About 22 vessels entered the shallow channel. They were trying to leave the war behind. Iran would intern them, as it had Iraqi military aircraft arriving earlier in 1991. More than 130 Iraqi aircraft had already flown there rather than face coalition fighters. Now, the Navy made the same choice. Repeated strikes at Qasr and along the Khor al-Zubair waterway preceded the departure. The route offered departure, not safety. The group of 22 ships moved into Khor Abdullah Channel under coalition surveillance. Shallow water and a narrow channel closed around the column between Bubiyan Island and the Shatt al-Arab marshes. The first Sea Skua missiles came from Royal Navy Westland Lynx helicopters, flying from the Type 42 destroyers HMS Gloucester, HMS Cardiff, and HMS Brazen. Their active radar seekers could find vessels boxed into the channel where there was little depth and no room to turn. The engagement lasted 13 hours. United States Navy aircraft joined the pursuit, and Canadian CF-18 Hornets sank 3 captured Kuwaiti TNC-45 boats with cannon fire. The Shatt al-Arab, formed where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, lay beside a route watched by coalition forces. The column had no concealed route left. Of the 22 vessels that tried to reach Iran, 21 were destroyed. After the escape route collapsed, Iraqi crews abandoned ships before coalition forces arrived. Others drifted without crews. A few sailed intact vessels toward coalition forces and surrendered. The training frigate Ibn Khaldun lay empty. Near Al-Fau, U.S. Navy and Coast Guard units captured the mine warfare vessels Jumairiyah and Al-Raya. Ships were surrendering, drifting, or left behind. The Navy's only offensive strike came from land. 2 Silkworm anti-ship missiles rose from a shore launcher toward the battleship USS Missouri. The first malfunctioned and fell short. The second kept coming over the water. HMS Gloucester fired a Sea Dart surface-to-air missile. More than 140 Iraqi vessels were destroyed or captured. Coalition forces took many. The Iranian Navy rounded up survivors that reached Iranian waters. In less than a week, Iraq lost its fleet as a fighting force. HMS Gloucester intercepted the second Silkworm with a Sea Dart in flight. The collapse at sea had another cost. Ships that reached Iranian waters did not return to Iraq. Tehran kept military vessels after the 8-year war. Several entered the Iranian Navy. Others rusted beside Iranian docks for years. Iran later used one Polnokny-class landing ship as a target during a live-fire exercise. Italy held 4 Lupo-class frigates Iraq had ordered in 1977. The Italian Navy took them in as the Artiglieri class. Their anti-submarine weapons were removed. Iraq lost ships it had paid for before they reached its ports. The 6 Assad-class corvettes faced a different fate. Malaysia bought 4 and operated them as the Laksamana class for decades. 2 remained at La Spezia. They stayed there until 2005. Iraq's planned submarines never passed negotiations. After Desert Storm, damaged vessels remained beside the ruined naval base at Qasr. International sanctions blocked any return to naval strength through the 1990s. The invasion of 2003 removed what was left. Coalition airstrikes destroyed some vessels. The rest no longer mattered in the fighting. 2 Assad-class corvettes reached the new Iraqi Navy only in 2005. Even the vessel that escaped both wars did not survive the invasion. After the 2003 invasion, the Finnish-built Al-Mansur took a Maverick missile and 3 500-pound bombs from United States Navy aircraft. Saddam had paid $50 million for the yacht. It had crossed the Iran-Iraq War and the Gulf War without damage. Local people later looted it. Its hull then capsized after the looting. Salvagers dismantled it in 2005. Coalition authorities began rebuilding only after 2003. The loss of Al-Mansur closed the old fleet's final chapter. Iraq assembled a smaller navy around its actual coastline, patrol boats for oil platforms and coastal craft for port security. By 2026, it had about 62 vessels, mainly small patrol craft. No frigates, no missile boats. Iraq has only 58 kilometers of coast. The new fleet guarded oil platforms and ports. That patrol mission exposed the old mistake. Iraq tried to buy a regional fleet for a coast that offered little room. Saddam Hussein bought ships from Soviet and Italian builders. Oil revenue paid the bills. But Iraq had only 58 kilometers of coastline, much of it disputed waterways and shallow channels. Neighbors hemmed in every route. The Iran-Iraq War cut through the fleet first. It destroyed 80% in its opening months. The surviving ships stayed out of action for 8 years. Then the Gulf War finished the defeat in less than a week. Iraq had spent about 3 decades funding naval ambitions with oil money. Its newest frigates never reached Iraqi service. The ships remained impounded in Italy's Liguria region through the Gulf War, under a foreign flag. The Italian frigates ordered by Iraq eventually sailed under another country's flag.